Hello and welcome to another press briefing with Covering Climate Now. I'm Mark Hertzgaard. I'm the Executive Director of Covering Climate Now, and joining me today and hosting this with me is my esteemed colleague, Santiago Saez. Santiago, want to say hello to the people?
Hello, and thank you for being here. Super exciting.
Yeah, and we're going to be joined in a moment by a guest that I'll have Santi introduce for us. But meanwhile, first, let me just say quickly for those of you who may not know, Covering Climate Now is a global collaboration of over 600 news outlets around the world that reach a total audience of billions of people. We are organized by journalists for journalists to help all of us do a better job of covering the climate story. And of course, today's session on what's at stake at COP30 is a big part of that mission. Everyone who is a bona fide journalist or news organization is invited to join Covering Climate Now. There's no financial cost to that. There's no editorial line that you must follow. Aside from one thing, you must respect climate science. And we offer a number of different activities here. Go to our website, coveringclimatenow.org, where you can find out how to join us and what we're up to at COP30. I'll give you a quick preview before we get into today's session. Next to Covering Climate Now will be in Belém live in person, and we are doing a number of things, starting with a November 11, so a week from today at 10 a.m. Belém time, that's 8 a.m. U.S. Eastern time. Cristiana Figueres, a key architect of the 2015 Paris Agreement, will be speaking with us at another press briefing on why the fight against climate change is far from over, despite what Bill Gates and Donald Trump may think. We will also be doing a very cool initiative with the group Info Amazonia. That's a collection of news outlets across Brazil and especially in the Amazon, who will be covering COP30 from the Amazonian perspective, daily coverage, which is available to all journalists and news organizations everywhere via Covering Climate Now. You don't have to be a Covering Climate Now partner to take advantage of this. They will be covering very just invaluable perspective from people who are living the story on the ground. Their coverage will be written in Portuguese. Then we will have it translated into both Spanish and English. Everyone around the world is invited to republish that material with credit, of course, to Info Amazonia and Covering Climate Now. No money changes hands. But also, even if you don't want to republish it, we hope that their perspective will inform how our fellow journalists from all around the world look at COP30 and try to avoid the kind of mistakes that can happen sometimes when journalists parachute in from far away to a location that they may not have the greatest knowledge about. So that's another thing. And then we will be having journalist-only happy hours in Belém. Stay tuned for that, for the location, that we'll have at least two of those. And that's part of our efforts at Covering Climate Now, continuing efforts to build a sense of community and connections on the climate beat all around the world. So if you happen to be in Belém, look for that. And then finally, all of this is part of our 89% project. That's a year-long initiative that we launched back in April with our lead partners, The Guardian and Agence France Presse News Agency, highlighting and exploring one of the, I have to say, one of the most surprising facts that has come to my attention in my 30 years of covering the climate story, which is that 80 to 89% of the world's people want their governments to take stronger climate action. 80 to 89%. That is a supermajority, way beyond what we would call a landslide if we were covering an election. But here's the kicker. That 89% doesn't realize that it's a majority. They think that they're 29%. And therefore, they don't act like a majority. They don't vote like a majority. They don't speak out like a majority. So we've been doing coverage on that. You can go to our 89% page at coveringclimatenow.org and see the stories that have been done there. Again, by The Guardian, by AFP, Deutsche Welle, the Asahi Shimbun in Japan, El País in Spain and Latin America. Lots of great coverage there, partly designed to alert world leaders at COP30 that this is how your constituents feel about this. Because just like the majority, the climate majority themselves don't realize that they're a majority, their political leaders don't realize that either. So that's a storyline that all of us as journalists can keep in mind as we are covering what goes on at COP30. Our leaders, our world leaders and their government negotiators, are they reflecting the popular will, the overwhelming desire by the majority of people on this planet for stronger climate action by their governments and also by businesses and by their fellow citizens? It's interesting, they also, in that 80 to 89% number, people are also quite willing to spend part of their own income on climate action. Now, all of this puts the lie to what we maybe is a prevailing belief that somehow climate change is just too polarizing an issue to even talk about, much less try to tackle. That's not what the data shows. So that's all part of the 89% project. And COP30 is going to be a very important meeting, and there is a lot to be said about it. I would just close by saying that this whole idea that somehow nothing is going to happen at COP30 and COPs never produce anything, that's a very United States-centered view. Yes, the United States is not going to be there in official delegation. That may be for the best because the U.S. has a long history at these COP talks of being more of an obstruction than a helper to progress. Anyway, so with that as an introduction, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Santiago, who is going to talk about what we're going to be doing in this next hour. Santi.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm Santiago Saez. I'm the director of training here at Covering Climate Now, and the official COP nerd of the organization. I really like these meetings and I follow them all year long, not just during COP. And today we're joined also by Carolina Dantas de Acevedo, who's the editor at Info Amazonia, the organization that Mark was mentioning before. Carolina is going to be talking specifically about the issues that pertain to Brazil, to the presidency, and also to the Amazon region. Hola, Carolina. ¿Cómo está?
Hi guys, nice to meet you. I'm Carolina. I'm talking from Belém. Now it's very hot here, also. So thank you for invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carolina. And today is the second session of our COP series, which started yesterday. You can see the recording on our website, and we'll share all the resources, all the links, and the recordings at the end of the week. Once we finish this series, there's one more session tomorrow, which is going to be really, really practical. We're going to see different tools and different websites and resources that you can use during your COP coverage. But today we're going to be looking specifically at what's at stake at COP30, a very, very important COP. All of them are important, but this one is in a key moment and in a key place, and we'll see that in a second. I would like to manage some expectations first. If this is the first time you cover COP, COP can be really a roller coaster of emotions. When you are covering them, it seems like something big might happen, and then it always seems that everything's going to collapse. And in the end, often, not always, but often, something really kind of bittersweet comes out at the end. COPs, by the way they are designed, and we saw that yesterday, and I recommend that you check out that recording, which we will share that email. It is COPs are often very very disappointing in the end because of how they work, and COPs cannot deliver everything. Climate action has to be achieved every single day in different forms. But COPs are very, very important anyway, because that's where many countries, all the countries in the world, have a voice with an equal weight. Maybe that's why some big countries don't like it that much. All right, let's sink our teeth into it. So what's at stake? COP30 this year is taking place in Belém. Belém, as you know, is in Brazil, and in the Amazon region, and it's exactly at the mouth of the Amazon River. That location is very, very much at the heart of this year's story. The Brazilian presidency is pursuing a large agenda like every presidency, but you can divide it in three parts. It can be summarized as F, F, F. Forests, finance, and fossils. If you remember nothing else from today, if you are just hearing the background, try to remember that triangle, because that's what's going to be important this year. forests, finance, and fossils. Now, Brazil is, in terms of fossils, Brazil is pitching a new tropical forest fund. So Tropical Forests Forever Fund, that's how it's called, TFFF. Of course, in terms of finance, countries are still tangled in that debate over who should pay and how much and when and how in the new long-term finance goal. And of course, in terms of fossils, everyone knows, and many don't like, that there needs to be a conversation around how fast to shift away from oil, gas, and coal. That is what is at stake this year. Basically, remember this: keep fossils standing, get real money flowing, and actually bite the bullet regarding fossil fuels. Let's quickly unpack those and imagine some headlines that we could find out of Brazil. Very quickly, forests, as we said, sorry, let's move on. Yeah, that's right. Forest, as we said, Brazil, as we said, has seeded its forest fund with an initial $1 billion. But the launch goal, remember, that's the launch goal, not the final goal. The launch goal is to reach $25 billion US, mostly from sovereign funds. It's also supposed to have a significant chunk, I think it's 20%, earmarked for indigenous peoples. And Carolina, I'll come back to you to talk about that a bit more in a second. Let's see very quickly the finance, like top lines here. Last year in Baku, rich countries promised $300 billion a year, but that's not enough. And the Brazilian presidency is trying to get from that 300 billion a year to 1.3 trillion a year, which is more in line with what research says that it's necessary to actually help developing countries take climate action. This process will be proposed by the Brazil presidency. It's called the Baku to Belém roadmap. It was supposed to be published last week. Then they pushed it to yesterday. And yesterday, when I went to see it, they said it has been pushed to tomorrow, the publication. So unfortunately, I cannot give you any concrete information about the Baku to Belém roadmap, but keep an eye on it because it hopefully will be published tomorrow and November 5th. If you're seeing this recording, then it's probably already been published. There is also 40 billion in adaptation finance that is still due from 2021 in Glasgow. So in Glasgow, they committed to this 40 billion in adaptation finance. So add all that for starters, and you have a very finance-heavy COP. And now you will argue that, of course, every COP is pretty finance-heavy. So yeah, this is not less, at least. And finally, the fossils. You can expect demands for a fossil fuel phase out or transition. This should be put in the agenda because it was supposed to be already talked last year in Baku, but it was not. Civil society definitely will put it on top of the agenda. But given the current global political situation, you can also expect that many major players will try to play it safe and try to focus more on the clean energy side. So we're going to see basically not so much on the demand side, but on the supply side. We're going to see big pushes on this side, such as scaling up investment in solar and wind, and more likely than real negotiations on the demand side for coal, oil, and gas. So yeah. That's very, very important. Is a key element of every COP, or it should be. But this year, I'm expecting that it will not be on the agenda of the big players, or at least not at the very top. Hopefully, I'm wrong. No. All right. Let's stop here for a second. I want to also remind you to keep an eye on how the presidency packages everything. There's plenty of talks on whether Brazil may try an omnibus decision or a single cover text. If you know what I'm talking about, that means you really are a geek like I am about COP. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry too much. Just get the idea that if we get an omnibus decision, that means that political consensus is weaker. And this is important this year, considering the whole geopolitical situation we're in. And now, Carolina, I want to ask you a couple of questions about Brazil and the Amazon. We were saying that, of course, this year's COP location puts the Amazon on center stage, and you're a specialist in the region. So, what's the main question that you would like reporters from around the world to ask whenever a shiny new announcement that is related to forests, somebody say, we are going to protect all these many hectares of forest, or we're going to join this fund, or we're going to do this or that. What is the question that is most important to you when these kind of announcements apply? Question or questions? You can say a couple of.
Difficult. I need to know this question also. So there's a lot of questions about the Amazon here in COP30 because we have a lot of problems in Brazil. But I need to talk about the COP30 in our perspective because this event, the COP30 for Brazil, it's very important because the Amazon is a biome who is a very large parts of Brazil. I can put my presentation here for you guys, or I have the.
We'll come back to the presentation in a minute. I just wanted to bring up your opinion specifically about this, and we'll come back to it. No worries.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think there's a lot of questions about. I'm sorry. Once again, because you put your questions in. I don't know the main questions. I think there is a lot of questions, you can answer about this.
And how I know that a big part of the whole protection of rainforests is protection of indigenous peoples and indigenous peoples' rights, as well as there are, of course, it's backed by science that the best way to protect rainforests is to protect the rights of indigenous peoples and indigenous lands. Do you think there is a significant chance this year to get significant protection for indigenous peoples in the Amazon?
The indigenous people will try to get a space in the texts, the final text, but I think it's difficult because I don't know how to say this in English, but and it says the contributions, the final.
And this is nationally determined contributions.
Yes, national. Yes, this. They are already with the governments. They are already the Brazilian government already finished that. So I think this will be difficult, but they are here in Belém already, and they will try to start a conversation with the government to try put the indigenous areas inside this politic. I will talk with you about it a little bit.
Thank you so much. We're going to see indices in a second. Mark, I see you unmuted. Do you want to pitch in?
Yeah, I think it's important, especially for some of our colleagues who may not be that familiar with the climate story in general and COP30 in particular, to understand that the reason that this COP is happening in Belém is, as I understand it, Carolina can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but that President Lula explicitly wanted the world to focus on forests and on rainforests. Most of the previous COPs have quite understandably focused on fossil fuels. As my colleague Santiago said earlier, it's 3 Fs at COP30, and forests is one of them, finance and fossils, all of them. But the point of putting this meeting in Belém, which was a controversial decision, right? Because Belém is not the biggest city, and there's a lot of, anybody who's going there knows that it's not easy to get accommodations, all of that. But as journalists, let's not lose sight of that symbolic point. And for a lot of our audiences, again, who are not following this stuff, at each individual detail, just to get across the fact that this is happening at the mouth of the Amazon River, the world's biggest river, and one of the absolutely critical tipping points for the planet, where the Amazon is now in real danger of going over the tipping point and turning irretrievably away from being a rainforest and into a savanna, very different kind of dry ecosystem that would wreak absolute havoc on rain patterns throughout South America, food production, etc. So that's the big picture here, folks. The location in Belém is symbolically very important. And then, of course, we have to follow and see the negotiations. Do the negotiators and the governments deliver an agreement that does honor to that symbolism?
That's right. Very, very important location. It's definitely part of the story. So very quickly, I'm going to give you a couple of tips. If we can see the slides again, will be this one. You see any claims, any announcements made during COP30, and you'll see a lot. They happen all the time. Ask yourself, are we moving any of the three Fs? Are these claims really gonna benefit either forests, climate finance, or fossil fuel phase out? If they don't move any, if they are not obviously linked to any of them, then what kind of interests is it advancing, this claim? Check out that and keep that triple F as your anchor. Finally, also remember that climate impacts either from extreme weather like floods, heat waves, wildfires, or secondary like insurance shocks, food price spikes. They are becoming more and more common. This has been an extreme year for heat specifically, but also floods, etc. Don't forget that whatever is decided and discussed in Belém is supposed to address those impacts. So ask yourself the question, does it? Does it actually address those? Remember the three pillars of good climate journalism, which are humanize, localize, and solutionize. And making something so global and far away as it can seem to be a COP as a local story is very, very important. So now Carolina was mentioning NDCs. We're going to see what they are really quickly and why are they important. So this is the engine room of climate action, nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. If you were in the session yesterday, we went a bit in depth in how they work and where they come from, where they were established in the Paris Agreement and so on. But these are, in a nutshell, climate plans that every country needs to submit before COP. So far, that hasn't happened. But these documents outline the goals of the country and plans and the plans to get there, to get to those goals. So far, the UNFCCC has received, I think, and this is covering around 60 or 61% of the emissions. I think is in the next slide. Can we quickly go to the next slide and then back again, real quick? Yeah, 69 new NDCs covering 61% of global emissions, and that's because China published it yesterday. Last week, the UNFCCC published a synthesis report that confirmed that NDCs submitted so far, included some that were not submitted at the time, like China, like I mentioned, and the EU, which hasn't been submitted yet, are not ambitious enough. The current national climate commitments, as reported by The Guardian, put us on a course to reduce emissions by 10% by 2035. That's roughly 6 times less than it needs to be to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. The findings of this UN report, of this NDC synthesis report, prompted the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to claim that the world has missed the 1.5-degree target. If you have seen his claims, there was an interview to The Guardian. That may or may not be true, but keep in mind that that doesn't change the need to contain heating as much as possible, as every 1/10 of a degree really, really matters. So now, when you are covering an NDC, let's see some journalism tips. So first, ask when you're looking at your country's NDC, if it's economy-wide, if it covers all gases, all sectors, including the non-fossil emissions, such as land use, especially if you are in Brazil or in Latin America, very, very important. Land use change-linked emissions are massive there. Credibility. Are there clear policies? Are there clear timelines, pathways? are they just giving you a goal and not being really explicit on how they plan to get there? If that's the case, if it's like an aspirational goal and it's not really clear how they're going to get there, you have lots of questions for your government and for your stories there. And then finally, do the cash math. Many NDCs are partially conditional on finance, and that's very important this year because, of course, of the Baku to Belém roadmap that we mentioned before, but also because of cuts from in aid budgets from several global north countries, including the United States, but also the UK and others. The question here is to say, okay, these are the goals, these are the pathways. Who pays for all this? How much of that finance is domestic? How much of that finance is international? This, as I said, is heavily linked to the Baku to Belém roadmap, which will be published tomorrow, and I encourage you to have a look at. Let's see some more tips for you guys. Yeah, this one. So that's the fossil transition. Every country needs to start transitioning away from fossil fuels. This was agreed upon on COP28. It hasn't been decided how yet, and that's a main point in the agenda this year. But NDCs should already plan a clear timeline for reducing fossil projects. Are they doing that? What are the constraints that countries may be facing? Those are some good questions for you. And finally, if you are looking for hooks for your stories, NDCs are notably dry and difficult to read and complicated, but there's some nice hooks that you can get, even if you are not a climate journalist or you're not covering climate all the time. I think every journalist is a climate journalist, but if you're not very used to the technicalities of the bit, there are some very nice news hooks that you can use that are the co-benefits. Look for side benefits, look for job creation, look for health benefits, look for ocean measures. Oceans are really demanded stories, ocean-related stories, so look for that if your country is not landlocked. And many NDCs contain specific sections on these topics, so it's a good point to start looking for possible stories that you can pitch to your editors. All right, so we are gonna now look at forests specifically. Sorry, no, there's a couple of story ideas here. So basically 2 questions. What's really in our NDC? You can do an analysis story, an explainer, find 3 to 5 expert voices, see if it aligns with the 1.5 degree goal, see if it's credible. That's a very easy, straightforward explainer piece that you can do in a day or 2, and it's very important. Second kind of story you could do is what the NDC means on the ground. Go local, identify real communities that might be affected positively or negatively by the policies that are contained or planned in the NDC. Things like electric grid expansion, jobs, cooking material changes, deforestation. Does what they need, these communities, align with what is expected? And now, yes, I'm going to pass it on to Carolina to talk about forests. So we have mentioned NDCs. We'll see now forests. Carolina, the floor is yours.
I'll share my presentation. You're sharing. Thank you. So guys, nice to meet you. I'm Carolina Dantas, editor-in-chief at InfoAmazonia. We are specialized in environment reporting. So we cover not just the Brazilian Amazon, we are in the other countries also. So Brazil, Guyana, Peru, Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador, Suriname, Colombia. There is Amazon in the other countries also. So please feel free to check out if you need anything, my email here. Next. Understanding the Amazon, next. So we have, I was talking about our context, but the Amazon represents half of Brazil territory. It's a lot. We have a big territory. So the half of territory of Brazil. So you have the 58% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So we need all this emissions is of deforestation. So you need to reduce the deforestation rate. We have a good news this year. The government reduced the deforestation rate, and we have the third lowest level in history. And the Lula will be saying this for everyone this year about deforestation. But it's important to say, on the other hand, we have this is the clear cutting of trees, one type of deforestation, one way to put the forest down. We have other ways to the forest destruction. There is other ways to the forest being degraded, such as burning and fires. And in Brazil, we have a lot of fires. Last year, forest degradation increased very much, also in indigenous areas. And this is not reflected in our emissions numbers. So this is important to keep an eye on in this COP30, because Lula will not talk about it. You need to be thinking about it, because it's not interesting for the government talking about degradation and this part of the what is going on in the forest in this other side. Please. Can go put it other. So indigenous land and these protective barriers, this is important also. Can you, well, yeah. Indigenous peoples have a strong presence here in Brazil. We have more than 400 types of indigenous peoples, people in Brazil. They are organizing village here in Belém also, and they are coordinating how to gain a seat at negotiation tables now. But they are very strong. Their main demand is for indigenous land demarcation to be recognized as a forest protection policy. I will show you this. Can you click on this? Yes. Can you show this? This flourish, yes. So this is the state of Rondônia in Amazonia, one of the 9 states of Amazonia. And in 1985, this is how it looks. Put it the right side. Yes, this is how the state looks. And okay, you have forests, we have agribusiness, you have indigenous areas, and okay. But if you go to the left in 2024, you can see the forest just in the protected areas, like indigenous areas, and the unidades de conservação, I don't know in English, but the conservation areas. So just in protected areas. The agribusiness is in the other side, outside these areas. So the indigenous people know this importance. In the end, these territories function as these territories functions as a protective barriers, you know, and they understand their value against emissions, and they want they want to they expect to carry this message this year in the COP30. Next, please. So you can start talking to TFFF or in other parts, Santiago. we'll talk about CHF now, or
Yeah, go ahead now. I think it's
Go
a
ahead.
good moment now. Yeah.
Okay. So we have a lot of pressures here in forests, in Brazilian forests, but not just in Brazil. You have Indonesia, you have in Africa, like Congo rainforest. Brazilian governments proposed the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, TFFF. Next. This is the biggest the biggest goal to Lula, because it's important for Brazil. It's the way to put money in the forest, in fact. And you need to finance the preservation of tropical forests, because you know the last the map. The money is in the agribusiness in Brazil, not in the forests. So we need to put money in the forests. So, and the carbon market, it's not working so good in Brazil. So in the way you need to work. So the fund will create a 25 billion from governments and 100 billion for the private sector. And 75 in fixed income securities for emerging and developed economies, and 25 in other markets instruments. And 75 countries will be able to receive annual payments of this fund. The indigenous people and traditional communities will get at least 12% of the fund, but this will be a discussion this year. Brazil's Quilombola communities plan to go to COP, requesting that this share be raised to 40%. Brazil's Quilombola is, do you know what is Quilombola communities? The Afro-Brazil community, traditional communities. They are very traditional in Brazil, and they are trying to raise to 40%. I don't know if you, it's difficult, but I think in the biodiversity COP in Colombia last year, they have a good victory about a lot of things. I think here in Brazil, you can get some things with the Quilombolas communities also. So you need to look in it, and I think you can get something.
Thank you so much, Carolina. And this, we were talking about money, and I think we can is a good segue into the next, because last year at COP29 in Baku, the central issue of the climate finance conversation, and I would argue the central issue of the whole COP29 was the new collective quantitative goal, the NCQG, which was very quickly and in a nutshell, the amount of money that developed countries would agree to funnel to developing countries to pay for climate action. This includes mitigation and adaptation. There isn't an agreement yet about whether loss and damage should be part of the goal or not. And the result last year, as I was saying at the beginning, was quite underwhelming. Developed countries agreed to pay or mobilize. And I'm using, for those who cannot see me right now, I'm using very air quotes there, because mobilizing is very relative. 300 billion US dollars per year by the year 2030. This is very insufficient, as I was saying at the beginning, according to developing countries, but also to independent research, as Oxfam pointed last year, 2 years ago. The amount that's actually needed is somewhere between $1 trillion and $1.5 trillion per year. So this year, that's going to be part of the conversation too. The Brazilian presidency will try to get countries to agree to that roadmap that we were saying, to move from 300 billion to a more adequate 1.3 trillion per year. As I was saying, this document will be published tomorrow, according to the UNFCCC page. I'm really sorry, I wanted to bring you some information about that today, but that's not going to be possible. Okay, so does that money come from? Let's stay in that slide, David. That money can come from public budgets. This is what the global South countries really demand. And this is basically meaning the money should be public money, should be taxpayer money. This has had not a great these have not been very welcome by global North countries, specifically and notably, but not only the US, that have been cutting development and aid streams to fund into the global South. So here's your story. Do climate cash commitments respond to actual contributions, or are countries promising what is not theirs? Are countries promising that they're going to be mobilizing money, and that means facilitating the private investment, for example, or moving loans through multilateral development banks, which is the second point that you have here. The multilateral development banks, that's where the big numbers happen. That's where you're going to see big programs going on, but you have to ask, are they loans or are they grants? Because if they are loans, that means there's debt. And if it's debt, that means there's debt added on top of countries that already have a lot of debt to service. And of course, this is not an ideal solution for these countries and in general for climate action. If there are loans, ask yourself what is the interest on these loans, and also follow what they consider climate finance. For example, as I was responding to a question a minute ago about nuclear, the World Bank, which is would be in this section, funds now also some nuclear projects, considering them climate finance, and is still debating financing upstream gas, which I don't really understand how this can happen, but this is happening. Actually, there is a debate. If you are financial journalists with an interest in climate, this is a huge, huge story right now going on in the World Bank. Finally, of course, private capital. It can be the main provider. It often is, but it's very unpredictable. It depends on markets. So it's not very reliable. And when you are trying to plan 10, 20, 30 years ahead, just relying on markets is not very useful. Even if it works in the end, great, but you cannot really rely on those to write up your NDC. There's two more very important climate finance issues. One is the adaptation fund. What I was mentioning at the beginning, the global South countries still are expecting delivery of $40 billion, which was promised in Glasgow, COP26, 2021. Yes, 2021. Can we move to the next slide? Of course, since 2021 until now, impacts have been multiplying, and that means needs are increasing. And NDCs require now more adaptation money that was expected in 2021. Of course, in terms of loss and damage, and just to be very quickly, what is loss and damage? Loss and damage is money to pay for impacts that are already happening. So there already is a fund for loss and damage, but it's still quite empty. It needs to be known if loss and damage is going to be included in the NCQG or the Baku to Belém roadmap or not. So the loss and damage one is going to be a big conversation this year as well. I'm going to stop here and pass it on to my colleague Mark. There are some journalist tips here, but I think we've been talking about them more or less, so we don't have that much time. So I'm going to skip over that and pass it on to Mark to talk about fossil transition. Mark, take it away.
Thanks, Santi. And I'll just remind everybody, please keep putting your questions into the Q&A. And when you do, give us your name, but also your outlet, or if you are a freelancer, what are the news outlets that you regularly contribute to? So we've talked about forests, we've talked about finance. Now we're going on to the third F, fossil fuels. Obviously have always been the main driver of global warming and climate change, but also the most contentious issue, precisely because the fossil fuel industry globally is arguably the richest and most powerful industry in human history. lots of political and economic muscle has been exerted over the years, going way back to the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, where there's been pressure from those fossil fuel interests to keep basically to keep their markets and their industries going. For many years, this is over the top context for you. It's really quite astonishing to think that the term fossil fuels was not mentioned in year after year after year in these COP negotiations. That was not by accident. That was because of the pressure from the fossil fuel industry. And bear in mind, the fossil fuel industry is not only private companies like Exxon and Chevron and BP and the others. They're very important, of course, but they're also state-owned oil and gas companies in Saudi Arabia, in Russia, in China, and in Brazil. And one of the issues that is attracting some controversy as we go into COP30 is the decision on the part of the Brazilian government to approve Petrobras, which is the Brazilian state-owned oil company, to approve them to do exploration for new oil and gas right off the coast of the Amazon, right outside of Belém. Just exploration so far, not production, but obviously that's going to be an issue that you can look at as a measure of, frankly, the difficulty of this transition and the economic and political realities. You've got a president in Lula in Brazil who clearly is a climate champion, but like most politicians, he also faces internal forces. For example, the legislature in Brazil still has very strong powers to the allies of his predecessor, Bolsonaro, very right-wing politician who Lula barely defeated in the last elections. And so Lula does not have a free hand here to do whatever he likes. And so look at that Petrobras decision, and that can be a window through which your coverage can look at how fossil fuel interests in general affect what's going on at this COP. In recent COPs, there have been more representatives from fossil fuel companies around the world than there have been negotiators. So the industry will be there. That's always an interesting story to do. How many of their representatives are there trying to lobby governments? Another thing to bear in mind is that oftentimes right before a COP or at the very start of the COP, there will be a big investigative journalism scoop that gets revealed. A couple of years ago, The Guardian and the BBC, working with the Climate Investigation Center in the UK, broke some really big stories showing that the leaders of the COP were publicly saying that we're going to try to reduce fossil fuel use. Privately, they were having conversations to literally cut business deals to expand production. So keep your eyes open for that. And even if there's no exposés, recognize that that's the tension here, that we still have an enormously powerful incumbent industry in fossil fuels that wants to continue producing for decades. That is a climate wrecking plan for sure. But if you look at the publicly available documents from all of these companies, state-owned and private fossil fuel companies, they basically are planning to increase oil production, gas production for decades. If that comes to pass, there is no way that the planet is going to stay under 2 degrees C global warming, much less get down to the 1.5 that should still be the goal. And let's remember here, 1.5, people don't talk about it as much as they used to, but 1.5 is still really, really important. The difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees, look back at the IPCC report of 2018. It's called Global Warming of 1.5 degrees C, a landmark report that Bill Gates evidently either never read or never understood or chose to forget when he said that the other day that if we have 2 degrees Celsius of temperature rise, that would not be, quote, a super bad outcome, unquote. I'd like to invite Mr. Gates to try and tell that to the several hundred million people That's a direct quote. Several hundred million people from that IPCC report in 2018. Several hundred million people, if the temperatures go above 1.5 to 2 degrees C, that's how many people are looking at extreme poverty and greater exposure to disasters. Or talk to the people of the Maldives or any of the other low-lying island nations around this world who will be underwater if we let temperatures go to 2. So very important to keep your eye on what happens to fossil fuels. Will oil, coal, and gas be mentioned in the final document? I remember being at the Glasgow summit a few years ago in 2021, I want to say, COP26 this was. And at the very, very end, I mean, in the last minute, China and India together objected to the agreed upon text and said, no, we have to take out a reference to phasing out coal. And I remember asking the question to the COP26 president, Alex Sharma, afterwards at the press conference, if he had tried to prevent that. And there were tears coming down his face at what had happened there. So these are very big powers that are at play here. Keep your eyes on the big picture. And I see also here the methane reduction. That's another one of these sleeper stories. Methane is a very, very important gas. Methane is the proper technical term for what the industry rebranded as natural gas. Try not to use that term. There's nothing natural about it. Methane, very important though, and that could be a quick win for negotiators because methane is 80 times more powerful as a heat trapping gas than carbon dioxide is over the 20-year period. And so you can buy a lot of time to make reductions later in this century if you can bring down methane. And so there's a number of pushes on that. Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York City, the UN's special representative on climate change in Anatoni, who is high up in COP30, they are pushing that now. That's definitely worth your time. And one final thought here, renewable energy as a replacement for fossil fuels. We're going to talk about this next Tuesday with Cristiana Figueres. The fact is that renewable energies and clean technologies in general are exploding, just booming around the world. You don't see it in the headlines as much. It's especially happening in global South countries. In Africa in particular, Pakistan is now dramatically increasing their solar usage because they're getting very cheap panels out of China. Twice as much investment around the world now is going into clean technologies as is going into fossil fuels. And so you see solar, the prices dropped to just plummeted, wind as well, batteries. That's all very good. And those are very important stories for us to report. However, it is really, really important not to lose sight of the bigger picture. We need clean energy to increase in order to keep a habitable planet. But most of all, we need the fossil fuel energy to stop. That needs to be phased out quickly. It doesn't really matter if we have a lot more solar and wind if we keep burning just as much oil and coal and gas. And sadly, in 2024, the world burned more coal than it ever has in history. So those numbers are also still going up, coal, gas, and oil production. Keep your eyes on that big picture and what does this COP30 do about that? Very important stuff. So I think I will stop there because we only have 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we have time for any other questions from our attending journalists.
Thank you so much, Mark. And actually, we still have a couple of slides from Carolina, who I would love to hear, Carolina, from you. We will try to answer the questions as we go. If we don't have time to answer your question today, remember that tomorrow at the same time, there's a continuation of this series, and we can get to them, especially the most practical ones. We can get to them tomorrow. Carolina, now, I would love to hear your take on the role of Brazil, what Mark was mentioning about the Petrobras project in the mouth of the Amazon River, etc. Take it on.
I will talk very fast because we have 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, and Mark was very accurate. So I'll try next. So So Brazil is one of the largest greenhouse gas emitters, and just like Mark talks, after years under far-right government, the country elected a center-left administration with Lula. Next. So, in this third Lula's mandate, we have Marina Silva, our Minister of the Environment. She's a key figure in combating deforestation in Brazil. For the first time, we have the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples. This is very important because is our first Minister of Indigenous People here in Brazil. And but in the other side, we have for the first time a government. The government has also pushed for oil exploration and the cost of the Amazon. This is a major contradiction in this COP30 here in Brazil. So nothing prevents the COP presidents with André Lago and Ana Toni will not trying to prioritize the implementation of the text who was approved in the I think the COP28, I think, or COP29, I don't remember. The part who was approved said how to ensure a just and planned transition away from fossil fuels. Do you remember this part who is approved? And I don't think they do not try to get this to discuss this again. I think they will try, and they are trying to do that, but it's difficult because the government is trying to not talking about it. So it's difficult, but they are trying, André and Ana. And in the other side, we have Lula and our Congress here trying to not talk about the fossil fuels. So this is our scenario in Brazil, political scenario about the fossil fuels in the COP30. In one we have the government and we have the COP30 presidency in different sites. Do you understand what I said? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolina. We don't have any more time. We're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for your questions. I couldn't get to all of them. Some of them are very practical and we'll answer tomorrow. There's a couple of people who have asked about fossil fuel lobbyists. We have Weston and also Tara who have asked that question. Usually the information about participants at COP gets public around the time that the COP starts. So probably at the end of this week or next week. It takes some time for outlets and NGOs to analyze who those people are because badges usually are don't align. So fossil fuel lobbyists don't go with a badge that says fossil fuels. They go with a badge that says university of whatever, or they go with in a country delegation or whatever. So it's not easy. So it's not quick, but usually that gets out around midway through COP. If you see when it got out last year, probably that's when you can expect it this year. It takes some time to analyze it, but that information becomes public at some point. So you should definitely you will hear about it, and we'll keep an eye on it, and of course public any serious investigation that comes out in Climate Beat and the rest of our channels. And that's it for today. The rest of the questions, we'll try to get to them tomorrow. Thank you so much, everyone. Remember that the recording of this session and all the resources that we've talked about will be shared. Remember that if you want to join us tomorrow again, you will have to sign up independently for that session. Can we share that in the chat? I don't know if it's been shared already. Sorry. It's no, it hasn't. I'll share it right now so you can sign up for that if you are interested. Let me show you. Here it is. There you go. That's our session for tomorrow. It's going to be super practical. I hope to see you there. And until then, thank you so much, Carolina. Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you so much, David, for helping us with this session. See you all tomorrow. Bye-bye. Have a good rest of your day.